Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The title of this particular interactive workshop training is entitled Exceptional Youth. I have designed this program to provide educators, those who work with students, the opportunity to have various tools to utilize while in the classroom, while in leadership, and things of that nature. I provide professional training working with exceptional youth. And you will find out throughout this program the objectives for exceptional youth. Now, this is not just a one-time program. This is an ongoing program that continuously provides tools. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Alfreda Love, and I work in the field of education. And in the field of education, I have performed research about working with challenging students, working with gifted students, working with unique learners as we're going to learn, and utilizing different techniques. And so I want to share those things with you. And thank you so much for joining me on this particular presentation. All right, so now we're up to our objectives for this exceptional youth presentation. Our objectives are as follows. We're going to define exceptional learners according to research-based principles. So there are two words that will describe exceptional learners. I almost said phrases, but two words. Our next objective consists of what are some types of learning disabilities. So we will be able to be reminded of some learning disabilities, as well as we will have some research on each particular disability. And when we speak about the disabilities that a student may exhibit, we will spend at least 3 to 4 weeks on that disability, working with strategies, watching videos, making notes according to some of the documents that I have created for you. All right, so now we're up to a video. And this video is from Stand and Deliver, and this is based on a true story. And what I want you to do is I just want you to watch this particular clip. And when you watch this clip, I want you to stop the video when you finish and write down what it may take for a leader, what it may take for an educator to change the paradigm of a school. With this Stand and Deliver, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis, but you can see it on YouTube as well, and we will use some of the clips for teaching points. With Stand and Deliver, this school was basically a school who was failing, and the students, the discipline was out of control, and so the teacher changed the paradigm. The administrator changed the paradigm of the climate by forming relationships, utilizing various strategies to teach students, and the result was passing scores. So what does it take personally for you, if you're an administrator, if you're a superintendent, if you're a teacher, if you work with a youth organization, if you have a new program, a new initiative, what is it going to take in order to achieve results? All right, so go ahead and watch this particular clip. And we're going to talk about what it will take in our next segment. All right, so as promised, we're up to exceptional youth. And there are two words that I want to utilize for exceptional youth. The words are unique and learners. When we talk about unique learners, unique means that anything that is different. And so that means that we're going to differentiate instruction. That means that these learners need different things, different items, different accommodations, different modifications. They need different ways to be successful. So I entitled Exceptional Youth, Unique Learners. What does that look like? What does that sound like? These are two specific questions that educators and leaders should understand. What does that look like? What does a unique learner look like? When we're speaking of that aspect, we're speaking of what types of behaviors does unique learners exhibit. We are focusing on behaviors. When we talk about sound, we're talking about articulation. We're talking about, does this student need speech services? We're talking about the language that the student speaks. Does the student really understand what is being taught? All right. So I want you to focus on the definition of unique learners. And what we're going to do is for each particular disability, we're going to utilize this definition. Unique learners, a learner who may have a learning disability due to for instance, we're going to focus on brain injury, the neurological aspect. Okay. So when students have brain injuries, this may cause a student to have a learning disability. All right. So for instance, if we was working on emotional disturbance, a learner, a unique learner is a learner who may have an emotional disability due to maybe a situation. Okay. So, or due to an event or due to an action. But it's always a learner who may have a learning disability due to. Okay. There's always a connection as to why a student is having difficulty learning. And we're going to learn those particular elements in order to apply it to the various learning disabilities. So this program really helps educators and those who work with students be able to identify and connect what type of disability relates to what type of behavior. Because many times what happens is we see the student have outbursts, we see the student walk out of class, but the connection is emotional disturbance, and so we don't make that connection. And so what happens is the student continuously take away class time, and that's not good for the teacher nor the student. Okay. All right. So that's what we're focusing on for the next 2 weeks, brain injury. All right. All right. In some aspects, when we deal with the brain, we're going to be talking about the cerebrum right here, as you can see it. And we're going to also focus on the brain stem, because if any of these parts are injured, the student can and will have some type of learning disability. All right, so I just want you to focus on this particular image, the brain and nervous system. And if there's any injury, especially in the cerebrum, okay, that student is going to have some type of learning disability. All right, so as we explore the various disabilities, and for instance, the disability that we're exploring is from a brain injury, okay? The student may have difficulty in reading, writing, spelling, math. They may have some type of auditory or visual impairment. They may have social skills or emotional skills. And so the brain can affect all of these areas, okay? Reading, writing, spelling, math, any of those core subjects due to a brain injury. So the teacher or the leader has to know that because of a brain injury, this student may have trouble with reading, writing, spelling, and math. And so therefore, with these presentations, we're going to have different interventions and accommodations specifically for those students who may have a neurological defect in the brain. All right, so here's another reflective video. Within this video, we have a student by the name of Christian, and Christian is 10 years old, and Christian returns back to school after he has a brain injury. And he indicated that some things were different. He was having difficulty now learning some of the concepts of school. And so Christian had an individualized education plan, IEP. With that plan, he was assigned a special education aide who would work with him. During this segment and during the next 2 weeks, when we study the brain injury and I provide you with tools, I want you to focus on the tools utilized to help the student. It's very important that when we work with all students, but when we work with students who have different injuries and disabilities, that we give them the accommodations and modifications that they need in order to be successful. So I want you to watch this video, and I want you to write down some notes about some positive things you hear Christian say, as well as what the school did to help Christian. Then I want you to reflect on yourself. What are some things that you would do if Christian came to your classroom, if Christian came to your school? What are some of the type of accommodations or modifications that you would give Christian? Take a look. There is a need for this exceptional child program. All right. There is a need for this training. Now, according to the U.S. Department of Education, the number of special education students, the number of students who have entered special education and need accommodations or modifications is on the rise. In 2016, we had 6.0 million students in special education. From 2017 to 2019, we have 7.0 million students. Now, this is what I want you to think about. All right. Some of the students have not been identified yet. All right. They have not been identified because, as I said before, there are individuals who may need training on how to identify these students. So some of these students have not been identified as needing special education services. Some students are still waiting on their testing or waiting to be tested for special education services. So that tells me that the data is going to increase, which means that individuals need to understand, okay, the different concepts related to serving students who are unique learners. So I want you to get ready for some research, get ready for some data on special education students and how to serve these students. That is the purpose of this program because we have an increase from 6.0 million students to 7.0 million students, and it's going to increase even more. All right, so be sure to check that out. All right, so this particular video is an example of some of the behaviors that a student may exhibit in a classroom due to a learning disability. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis and then I want you to watch the video. This particular video is about a student by the name of Shane, okay? And Shane is off task. And so the teacher basically says, get out your math book. So Shane gets out his math book and slams it on the desk. Okay. Then he tells Shane, Shane, I need you to answer a problem. Shane does not answer the problem. Okay, Shane, I need you to move to the back of the room. Shane moves to the back of the room and the teacher says, okay, I need you to get your act together or either you're going to have to leave. So he walks out the classroom. All right. And so I have created a form for you to utilize in order to come up with proactive strategies and also to document different behaviors and come up with solutions. So that way, when we get ready to create Shane's behavior plan as well as his individualized education plan, then we will have sufficient data and things that you have already tried. And those things that are working with Shane, we can utilize that as we set up strategies for this student. All right, so I want you to take a look at the video and then I want you to focus on the next form that I have created for you. So be sure to do that. All right, thanks. All right, so this next form is entitled Exceptional Youth Criteria for Educators. This is a form that I actually created for you. All right, so with this form, you can put the student's name, date, and subject. All right, so with the scoring, because this is how you as an educator, all right, is going to identify if this student needs an individualized education plan or if the student needs a behavior intervention plan. All right, so the standard score, here we go, 80 to 100. All right, so you give a test, a benchmark, any type of assessment that your school has. The student scores 80 to 100. That's a high range, so we don't have to really worry about this student needing any type of interventions yet. 60 to 79, that's the mid-range. We want to keep an eye on things. This student who's making a 60, we really want to pay close attention because they may be a potential candidate for SPED. Now, if the student is making a 0 to 59, that's a low range, which means that this student, right, may be a candidate for special education. And with that, during instruction, all right, there needs to be intervention with this student. And if there is no progress within the week 2 or 3 of working with this student has potential for needing special education services. Now, we're going to talk about this because one thing that we don't want to happen is that if a student is in the 0 to 59, which is a low range, and the student probably needs some services, we don't want to wait 2 weeks before a state assessment. We don't want to wait uh, 4 months before the assessment. We want to catch it at the beginning. Okay, that means that an assessment should be given in order to determine the range of the student. All right, and so if the first test is maybe a 59, 58, 59, let's look at the second test. And if the student is consecutively in that range 0 to 59, that student is going to need some type of plan, some type of educational plan in place, and accommodations and interventions. All right. Now then, let's look at a regular assessment, because what's going to happen is we don't want to just, a regular assignment. What's going to happen is we don't want to just base our findings on different test scores. All right. So we're going to look at homework. 90 to 100 is high, 70 to 89 is mid-range, 0 to 69 is low range. Why did I do that? Because when students have homework, they can receive help from either their parents or they can check their notes. And so there are different things, different accommodations that a student can have when they have homework assignments. And so the reason why, if a student is still making a 0 to 69, right, on homework assignments and a 58 on tests, that student has a high potential of being a candidate for special education services. When we analyze behavior, okay, it's totally opposite, because the more times a student behavior has to be corrected, the more likely that student needs a behavior intervention plan. So if you're teaching a lesson, all right, or if a student is sent to the office 5 or more times, that's a high range. If a student is interrupting your class 3 to 4 times, that's mid-range. Going to the office 3 to 4 times, that's mid-range. If the student doesn't go to the office and maybe you have to get on a student once or twice, that's a low range. Now, for instructional time's sake, if a student is interrupting the class more than 3 times, okay, consecutively, that student needs some type of intervention plan, behavior intervention plan. Whether the teacher makes it, the teacher, you can make a generic behavior intervention plan, but first you want to make sure, I want you to look at this chart. For instance, and I'm going to give you an example in a few minutes. You're going to put the child's name, you're going to put behavior, the activity. When I say the activity, I'm speaking of what subject was this. Okay, if this is in the hallway, then you can put hallway. Unstructured. Okay, that's the key word. In the hallway, the student gets in trouble. When the student is at lunch, the student may get in trouble. Things like that. So we'll know, okay, this student gets in trouble during unstructured time, so this student needs some structure. Then the action, what action was taken? So to make this relevant, let's go ahead and look at our next slide, which is Shane. Okay, we're going back to that video. So let's look at what we marked for this particular student. All right, so this particular document is entitled Exceptional Youth Criteria for Educators. All right, so we're going to put the student's name, Shane. Okay, this is from the video. Then today's date, the subject is math. All right, the scoring scale for tests. All right, 80 to 100 is the high range, 60 to 79 is mid range, 0 to 59 is low range. All right, so for instance, the student took the test. All right, it could be a benchmark test, could be any type of assessment. All right, so the student took the test, scored a 45. Where does that 45 fall? Great, in the low range. So because that's in the low range, this student may be a candidate for a special education. Now let's look at the regular assignment, homework assignment, things of that nature. The reason why these numbers are higher, as I said before, is because the student can look at notes, the student can refer back to many different things. So 90 to 100 is high, 70 to 89 is mid-range, and 0 to 69 is low range. If the student is scoring 0 to 69, that student may be a candidate for special education. Now, in order to understand and find out if the student is actually a candidate for special education, you're going to add up the two numbers. All right? You're going to add them up. And still, when we add that number up, the student is in the low range when we get the average. So this student has a potential for special education. This is called the teacher check. Now, let's look at behavior. Behavior is a little bit opposite because the more the student has to be redirected or take up instruction time, that means this student needs a behavior intervention plan. Whereas in academics, the lower the student scores, then the more likely that student needs special education services. So with behavior, if the student interrupts the class 0 to 2 times, that's low. 3 to 4 times, that's mid-range. 4 to 5, that's high range. Now, for the sake of instructional practices and instruction time, 3 or more times, that student probably needs a behavior intervention plan because your instruction time is suffering because of these behaviors. So if a student has to be redirected 3 to 4 times within your class period, that student needs a behavior intervention plan. Now, notes, and these are notes from the video. So when you're making notes, okay, and I know that some teachers say, I don't have time to do this, I'm trying to teach. Now then, here's the thing, okay, you don't have to make a long dissertation. For instance, drawing off task, asked to work a problem, asked to take out book, asked to move, walked out the classroom, and I put worksheet, okay? Those are things that will jog your memory about what happened and what you did. Now then, here's the next part of the form, which is crucial. So let's go to the next part of the form. And with this form, if you have any questions, let me know. All right, but to sum this up, you want to make sure you have the student's name, the date, the subject, okay? That's important because when we're making these IEP plans and behavior plans, we need that information. Here is the different ranges. The student is constantly falling in the low range. This student needs help. And so we have to provide this help for the student. This should be from day one, okay? We shouldn't wait to the middle of the semester, 2 weeks before testing, none of that. This should be a document that you utilize in order to assist your students, all right? And as you can see, these notes here, that's just simple, that's not even sentences. That's just simple little phrases to help jog the memory, all right? All right. Slide was actually a chart, but due to this being a presentation, the chart was removed. So basically what this is a sheet to document Shane's behavior, all right? So Shane was drawing. He was asked to take out his math book. He slammed the book. The teacher called on Shane to work a problem. Still wasn't paying attention. So the teacher gave him an ultimatum. Either you pay attention or you get out. So he walks out of the classroom. The reason why we need this particular training and this program and this initiative is because we want to make sure that the actions are, first of all, proactive rather than reactive. We also want to make sure that we provide educators and leaders with tools in order to utilize to help students, right, with their particular behaviors. We want to make sure that we're educating teachers, educating leaders in order to help with behaviors because we want to increase instructional time. That's what this program does, as well as increase student learning and student growth. All right, so check that out. Be sure to check that out. All right, so this particular slide wraps up the concept of the effective method that I provided for you, and it fills the void for the ineffective time that was spent redirecting a behavior. So the effective portion of this particular presentation was to chart and document. And you have that format, and I also have this information in PDF format. If you email me, emonya_love@yahoo.com, I can provide you with a copy of that particular document. The ineffective effect of the void of charting and documenting was a decrease in instruction time because that teacher had to constantly redirect the student. So in the video, you see more redirecting than teaching. And so this particular program, this particular training, these trainings will provide you with tools to utilize so that you can help serve students, whether they have brain injuries, learning disabilities, things of that nature. You will be able to have those tools. I want each of you to connect with me because I will have a channel for this exceptional youth training, exceptional youth program. I'm Dr. Alfreda Love. My email is emonya_love@yahoo.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn under Alfreda Love. I make presentations on education, the new program with exceptional learners. I have been asked to speak at some of the educational conferences. You can also check me out on YouTube and connect with me. I'm under Alfreda Love. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have questions with this particular presentation, email me at emonya_love@yahoo.com. Thank you so much.